What's going on, Packer fans? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Appreciate you joining me today. The main topic for today and what we're going to be discussing is the Packers with the most to prove in 2022. First of all, a huge thank you to Zach Cruz over at Packers Wire for letting me steal this idea. He wrote a fantastic article over on PackersWire.com on Monday. Please make sure to check it out. He was gracious enough to let me use his list today so I can give you his players that he had ranked, and I'll go over mine as well, and we can kind of compare and contrast. And most fun, you can comment below to let me know and let Zach know who had the better list, Zach or I. Spoiler, we had 5 of the 8 same players, so there's definitely some crossover here, but I thought this was a really fun topic and definitely wanted to discuss it. Zach defined this in his article as a young player looking to improve, a veteran attempting to bounce back from a disappointing season, or an ascending player growing into a new role. He thought all of those provided ideal scenarios for a quote-unquote prove-it type of season. So I will go through Zach's list first, and then I'll go through my list one by one and why I rank them as such. Then we'll kind of compare and contrast, and I'll go over some honorable mentions as well. So Zach's list, I can't speak for Zach. I don't know if he has these listed 1 through 8 or not, if they're actually in order, but this was the order that he put them on his site. He had number 1 as Josiah Garcia, number 2 is Amari Rodgers, number 3 is Darnell Savage, number 4 is Sammy Watkins, number 5 is Mason Crosby, 6 is Alan Lazard, 7 Royce Newman, and 8 as Jordan Love. So that was his list of 8 players that have the most to prove for the Packers in 2022. Now, I want to give my list to sort of compare and contrast. Number 1 on my list, who is number 3 on Zach's list, is Darnell Savage. And to me, there are few players that have the ability and the opportunity to prove themselves more this season than Darnell Savage. We know that Savage just got his 5th-year option picked up, so that's huge for him. But we've seen this player, first-round pick, have amazing moments. We've also seen him have some extremely disappointing moments. The inconsistency has been there really since he started with Green Bay. I thought his second year was by far his best year. I thought he took a major step back a season ago, but this is a former first-round pick who oozes potential, who has everything in his arsenal that you want as a safety, from a rangy center fielder, amazing speed, the ability to come up and fill in the run game, and the ability to be a cover player as well. He's just been inconsistent in all phases. As a rangy safety, he hasn't always taken the best angles. As a player coming up to make the tackle, he hasn't been a sure tackler. And in coverage, he has been extremely hit or miss, and unfortunately, more miss than hit in that specific situation. We've also had a couple dropped interceptions mixed in, so it has just been an inconsistent 3 years from Darnell Savage. But you absolutely have a player that is designed to be a big-time playmaker in this defense. They use him in that robber role a ton. They're putting him in passing lanes. They're giving him opportunities to be a playmaker. And there is a real legitimate chance, and I've talked about this in the past, that with the players that the Packers have assembled on defense, that Darnell Savage may be your 11th best player on defense. And we all know that sometimes you're only as strong as your weakest link. And it should be noted here that if Darnell Savage is your weakest link on defense, you are in a very good position overall. I don't think there's any debating that. But if Darnell Savage can go from inconsistent to below average player, even to the level he was playing at, I thought, in his second season or above that, now all of a sudden you don't have that weak link. Now he's probably in the, I don't know, maybe middle tier of your defensive players. And again, it just raises the overall level of the defense. Adrian Amos is such an incredible safety next to him that it gives Savage a bit more freedom. I want to see those plays. I want to see the consistency. I want to see better coverage. I want to see him make those tackles in the run game. I want to see him be that rangy center fielder. He has everything at his disposal. Now is the time to put it together. And if he can, he has the ability to take this defense maybe from a top 10 defense to a top 5 defense. That's how good he can be. And that is why he is number 1 on my list. I think he has a lot to prove as a former number 1 pick. Speaking of former number 1 picks who have a lot to prove, this was number 8 on Zach's list. He is number 2 on my list, and that is Jordan Love. And we certainly don't know how much time that Jordan Love is going to get to prove himself in this season, but we do know that he's going to get snaps in training camp. We do know that he's going to probably play the vast majority of the preseason. And whatever opportunities he does get, whatever playing time he gets in preseason and the regular season, he absolutely needs to make the most of. There is still a question mark as to whether or not there is a long-term value in Jordan Love. And next year, Green Bay is going to have to make that same Darnell Savage decision, the fifth-year option with Jordan Love, and it is a much more expensive fifth-year option because he's a quarterback than what Darnell Savage's was as a safety. So there is a major question mark as to whether or not Green Bay can even consider picking up that fifth-year option, and that is a real turning point in the career for Jordan Love. So if he wants to show that he has a long-term future in Green Bay, or really as a starter with any franchise, he has to start making the most of these opportunities. I don't feel like he did that last year in Kansas City or Detroit. Not all of his fault. I thought the game plan specifically against Kansas City was far under par, especially for a quarterback making his first start. But he had opportunities in those games to make plays and couldn't consistently do so. This is a huge season for Jordan Love. And again, we don't know how much he's going to see from a playing time standpoint, but whatever time he does, he needs to make the most of it. Number 3 on my list was number 5 on Zach's list, and that's Mason Crosby. So we're 3 for 3 in agreeing so far. Mason Crosby's the 7th highest paid kicker this season, and he is coming off the worst season of his career. There's no question that for over a decade, the one consistent piece that you could probably lean on special teams that you felt comfortable with was Mason Crosby from a kicking standpoint. Green Bay had the ability to move on from Mason Crosby this offseason, go in a different direction, and clearly they felt this was not a Mason Crosby issue. This was an everything else issue. They changed the holder. They're having an open competition at long snapper and even changed the long snapper midway through last season. They have changed special teams coaches. I guarantee you they're going to change up how they're blocking on the extra point and field goal units as well. So they are of the belief that this was not a Mason Crosby issue. This was everything else. Now, with everything in tow, new coordinator, new blocking scheme, new holder, potentially new long snapper, the onus is on Mason Crosby to simply go out and make his kicks and do what he's done so well for such a long period of time in Green Bay. Whether or not he can do that remains to be seen. He is entering or maybe past the twilight of his career, right? There is not many Mason Crosby seasons left. There was thoughts that maybe he would retire this offseason. That didn't happen. He remains the kicker in Green Bay. I like the decision by Green Bay. I think if you can have a consistent kicker, that could really help Green Bay come playoff and hopefully beyond this upcoming season. But Mason Crosby is going to have to show that he can bounce back. If he doesn't, that could be the end of his tenure and end of his career as a kicker in the NFL. If he bounces back, there's no telling how, he could play 2, 3, 4 more seasons, kind of taking over, that Adam Vinatieri mold. So we will see, but I do think Mason Crosby, I'm with Zach on this one. I think he has a ton to prove this upcoming season. Number 4 on my list was number 1 on Zach's list. So we're 4 for 4 so far. Josiah DeGuara. I really liked some of the things that I saw towards the end of the season from Josiah DeGuara last season. You had the touchdown in the back of the end zone that I talked about yesterday with Perry and Alex in the Minnesota game, and I thought that he gained confidence from that. You had the big, 62-yard tight end screen that he took to the house from Jordan Love against the Lions. So we're seeing some big-time plays here, right? Back of the end zone touchdown catch where he went up and made the play. Big 62-yard run after the catch, tight end screen. Just some plays that we haven't seen out of some of the tight ends in Green Bay. He has the ability to be a tight end, an H-back. You can line him up in line. He can be sort of that, mismatch receiving threat, maybe a little bit of fullback here and there. This was supposed to be the, Kyle Juszczyk, this, tool that Matt LaFleur could use in a variety of different ways and just sort of be the Swiss Army knife that sort of opens everything else up. He hasn't been that yet. Now, he has had some injuries, which I think has caused sort of some of the slow start to his career. As mentioned, I think we started to see him come on towards the end of last year. As Perry and Alex and I also talked about yesterday, we've also seen Dominique Daphne get reps with the 1s and DeGuara with the 2s. So there does seem to be some internal pressure potentially on DeGuara to go out and really prove himself and grab this spot and make the most of it. as again, Perry and Alex I talked about yesterday, I wholeheartedly believe that Josiah DeGuara is going to be on the team this upcoming season. I don't think they're letting go of a third round pick this easily. I think we started to see some of the potential from DeGuara, but he needs to be a more fundamentally sound player, specifically as a blocker. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but if he's going to be that mismatch, he has to get the job done as a blocker. If he can do that, then teams are going to have to honor that. And then you start getting matched up with linebackers more often where he can take advantage of his speed a little bit more and being a better receiving threat in that regard. So I do believe this is a top 100 pick that Green Bay had a ton of faith in picking him in the top 100. It was considered to be a reach at the time, but Green Bay thought he could be a major play in this offense. He hasn't been so far. This is a very big season for Josiah DeGuara. Number 5 on my list was not on Zach's list, and that's Aaron Rodgers. And maybe that's not fair. Maybe the back-to-back MVP isn't having a prove-it sort of season. But as I've gone over ad nauseum through the entirety of this offseason, the regular season for me no longer matters for the Packers this season. Unless Aaron Rodgers gets hurt, which in that case you're screwed anyway, so we're not even talking about that scenario. If Rodgers plays for any significant period of time this season, the Packers unquestionably are a top 7 team in the NFC. There's zero debate about it. They will be one of those top 7 teams, which means they're going to get in the playoffs. And I don't frankly care because we've seen them get the 1 seed and everything in between 1 and 6. The only time they won the Super Bowl in the Aaron Rodgers era was when they were the 6th seed. I frankly don't care if they're playing at home at Lambeau, on the road anywhere else. I just want to see this team playing their best football in January and February. And that has not been the case specifically for the Packers and this Matt LaFleur-led team over the last 3 seasons. But Aaron Rodgers, as a player who is in the argument for the greatest player of all time, back-to-back MVP, 4 MVPs in his career, has only 1 Super Bowl to his name. Is that all of his fault? Clearly not. Special teams, defense has been more the bane of his existence over the last, decade plus than Aaron Rodgers has been. Outside of the 49ers game last year, I can't point to a game that I can think of and been like, all right, the Packers lost a playoff game because of Aaron Rodgers. And even last year, to me, it was more special teams than it was Aaron Rodgers. But he has not played his best football in the playoffs the last couple seasons with games on the line. I think the 49ers game and the NFC Championship game 3 years ago, however you want to view it, 2 years ago against Tampa, I thought he was mostly good, but the interception was definitely costly. And there were a couple other plays, specifically the red zone opportunity where he didn't get the job done there. And then last year against the 49ers, he was really bad frankly in that game. So I do think that Aaron Rodgers has a lot to prove come playoff time. He is, clearly one of the highest paid players in football. He is considered one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. If he gets one more Super Bowl in him, that changes his legacy forever. If he doesn't, it's not to say that he's not still one of the greats and he still has a Super Bowl to his name, but I think there will be a level of disappointment that comes with Aaron Rodgers only having 1 Super Bowl. And I think he has a lot to prove to see if he can get over that. Right or wrong, I think that's just ultimately the case in today's sports atmosphere. Yeah, these lists, when you look back at legacies, they want to see championships. And right now, Aaron Rodgers has 1. I think he still has a lot to prove in that regards. Number 6 on my list was number 2 on Zach's list, and that is Amari Rodgers. Early 3rd round pick that they traded up for a season ago. I think we all had expectations that Amari was going to be able to come in and be a gadget sort of player, good punt returner, maybe a kick returner, and just none of that really turned out. Punt returner, he did not perform well. I didn't get much of an opportunity in the slot. When he did, there just wasn't much to speak or write home about. I think there's still something there. The good news is that, I guess the bad news is last year you could tell he wasn't playing with any confidence. And I wrote about that on multiple occasions that I just didn't like the player that we saw at Clemson, just the Amari Rodgers playing with a butt ton of confidence. That's the scientific term. And the Amari Rodgers last year, who you could see was just not playing with any confidence. That was the starkest difference to me. The reports are that Amari Rodgers is fully confident going into the season. And if that's the case, I think we could see a very different player. But we know that 3rd round picks have been a struggle for Green Bay. Amari Rodgers is trying to be, along with Josiah DeGuara, a player that can hopefully break that streak and be a player that really makes an impact. The Packers have open spots on this offense for playmakers, and they could really use Amari Rodgers taking a step. I think he has a lot to prove. Again, I'm with Zach on this one in this upcoming season. Number 7 on my list was not on Zach's list, and that is Aaron Jones. Listen, I love Aaron Jones to death. He's a phenomenal running back. I think he brings so much of a different flavor to this offense. I think he might be still their best playmaker overall on the team. But you also have to remember, I think we have seen a couple signs of maybe a little bit of decline from Aaron Jones. I think we didn't see quite the explosive plays. I think a lot of that was due to the offensive line a season ago. But Aaron Jones is getting a little bit up there in age. And over the next 2 seasons, Aaron Jones is the second most in cash paid over the next 2 seasons, behind only Christian McCaffrey, Zeke Elliott, Derrick Henry, and Saquon Barkley. He's 5th on the list of most cash paid to running backs over the next 2 seasons. So this is a very high paid running back at a position where there is constant churn. You are seeing new running backs be the best running back almost every single season. And when you're in the top 5 in money over a 2-year period, there's a lot of expectations to live up to that. And we'll see what Aaron Jones can do. We know he's going to split time with A.J. Dillon. I think that's best for both Dillon and Jones. But I do think that there's going to be a bit more of an onus on Aaron Jones to be a playmaker. I think they're going to use him more as a receiver in this offense as well. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. But based on his contract being a top 5 paid running back over the next 2 seasons in cash paid, I just think there is a level of pressure on him to perform at a higher rate than maybe he did a season ago, not see that decline that we've seen from running backs that start getting around the same age that Aaron Jones is now. So I do think there is a small level of pressure on Aaron Jones to prove himself and still be one of the top running backs in the NFL this season. And last but not least for me is number 8 on my list, who is again a player that was not on Zach's list, and that's Rasul Douglas. I think I don't think what Rasul Douglas did last year was easy in any way, shape, or form. I think he came in, had a phenomenal season, but I think it's easier to have that 1-year season where you're the Cinderella, nobody has any expectations for you, and then you go out and have that season. I think it's a lot harder to repeat it and do it over in year 2. And remember that Rasul Douglas was like this close probably to like being out of the league. He was much closer to being out of the league than he was to getting the contract that he got this offseason in Green Bay. He came in and had a phenomenal run in Green Bay, but let's also remember it was only 13 games, and there were a few negatively graded games within those 13 as well. So you're taking about a 10-game-ish sample size and saying, yeah, we feel like that was the real Rasul Douglas, not the Rasul Douglas that got cut and cut and cut and cut over and over and over and over the last few seasons, and that this is going to be the guy that we're going to give a pretty decent-sized contract to. I think they were right in doing so. I think the contract could end up being a steal. But when you go from the Cinderella where there's no expectations and you're making no money whatsoever, at least comparatively, to the guy that just got a shiny brand new contract and now you're expected to be a top 3 corner and perform very well, the expectations change there quite heavily. And I do think there's going to be a level of pressure on Rasul Douglas this upcoming season that he certainly didn't face a season ago and probably hasn't faced since he was a top 100 pick when he was initially drafted. So Rasul Douglas, number 8 on my list. So just to recap Zach's list: Josiah Garcia, Amari Rodgers, Darnell Savage, Sammy Watkins, Mason Crosby, Allen Lazard, Royce Newman, and Jordan Love. My list: Darnell Savage, Jordan Love, Mason Crosby, Josiah Garcia, Aaron Rodgers, Amari Rodgers, Aaron Jones, and Rasul Douglas. We agreed on 5 of the 8: Darnell Savage, Jordan Love, Mason Crosby, Josiah Garcia, and Amari Rodgers. As far as his list of other 3, Allen Lazard, I feel like that is more opportunity than needing to prove himself. I think we've seen Allen Lazard play good football. Yes, if he's expecting to be the number 1 wide receiver and the guy, and there's a ton of expectations for that, then yeah, he's probably going to have to go out and prove that. But I think Allen Lazard, I think we know what Allen Lazard is. I think expecting him to be just this, immediate, like number 1 guy replacing Devontae Adams, I don't think is necessarily fair to Allen Lazard. But I do think he has opportunity. I'm not so sure that it's necessarily pressure. I would say the same thing for both Sammy Watkins and Royce Newman. It's not like Green Bay signed Sammy Watkins to this huge contract. I do think if Watkins wants to maybe live up to his initial draft billing still, like this is probably his last chance to do so. So I do think there is some pressure on Sammy Watkins, and this could be his last chance to get any sort of real contract from any team. If he doesn't perform this year, gets injured again, it's going to be really tough to get anything than a vet minimum and a prove it contract next year from any team. But Royce Newman, late 4th round pick, I think he's already shown that he has the ability to be an okay offensive lineman if needed as like your fifth offensive lineman. But again, I think he has opportunity. If he can take a jump, he could be, a really good offensive lineman in this league. If he stays the same, though, I don't think he necessarily has anything to prove. I just think, ultimately he would be a rotational offensive lineman, maybe your fifth best lineman, at best. But I don't think he has necessarily as much to prove. I just think this is a really good opportunity for Royce Newman. Again, the three that I had on my list that Zach did not have on his: Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, and Rasul Douglas. Some honorable mentions really quick. I think you could make an argument for David Bakhtiari, more that I think David Bakhtiari is going to want to prove to everyone that he's healthy and that he's still one of the best players in all of football. I think that's more of a David Bakhtiari proving that. I don't think David Bakhtiari has to prove anything. This is an unfortunate injury. He did nothing wrong. This is not on David Bakhtiari. So I didn't want to include him on this list, but I think there could be an argument made for having this be a prove-it season when he's one of the top paid left tackles and he hasn't played, he's basically been hurt for over a year and a half now. This is a big season for David Bakhtiari. There's no question about it. I just struggled to put him on the list when this had nothing to do with his fault in any way, shape, or form. Devondre Campbell, you could make a similar argument to Rasul Douglas. Dean Lowry, based on his contract, I think there's got to be some level of pressure to live up to where he's at. Same thing with Preston Smith. I think you could make honorable mentions for all of those. An odd honorable mention, I will say, is Vernon Scott. Perry and Alex and I talked about this yesterday. When you have a guy who got a 53-man roster spot handed to him last season and wasn't active for a single game, like they kept you on the roster to not let you get signed by any other team for some reason. They basically gave you a full season's worth of pay to not play a single snap on defense or special teams simply based on your long-term potential. You better pay that off, or that was for absolutely nothing. So in a weird way, Vernon Scott better have some pressure on him. And then I know it's not a player, but Matt LaFleur, despite having 3 13-win seasons, has only 2 playoff wins to his name. He has not been his best in the playoffs. So I do think there is a level of pressure on Matt LaFleur as well to perform much better in the playoffs than he has over the course of the last 3 seasons. A huge thank you to Zach Cruz for putting together this article and this idea. Please make sure to follow Zach on Twitter at ZachCruz2. That's ZachKruse and the number 2. And make sure to check out this article over on PackersWire.com. Zach legitimately does tremendous work. This is not me fluffing Zach up. He is easily one of my favorite Packers writers. So make sure you're following him and checking out his work on the regular. He does a phenomenal job and one of the absolute best out there covering the Packers. That does it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. Always appreciate it. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all new episode. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.